Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast, and today we're carrying on our series of frequently asked questions. And again, we're joined by Adam Powell, and we're going to be discussing today essentially how you can still get development finance with limited experience. Because one of the questions we get asked all the time is, I've never done a development before, I'm just getting into developments, can I still raise development finance? So we're going to touch on that today and talk through how you can still raise finance. So Adam, first time developer comes to you, they ask you to raise development finance. What do they need to know? What do they have to have in place? What are the parameters? What are they, and also on the projects, what sort of size projects are they going to be going
out to? I think that's the key, because we sometimes get phone calls from clients that they may be property investors, and they've suddenly been approached either by an agent or a property sourcer, or they've actually found it themselves, where there's a site that's got planning for 14 units and they need to borrow 5 million, and they haven't got any development experience. The likelihood of us actually being able to get a facility for them is pretty remote.
Yeah.
The key thing, I think, that if you've never done development before, you may have some property experience in investing, maybe done a couple of refurbs, maybe light refurbs.
Yeah.
And certainly in a few years ago, if you've got zero experience, development lenders wouldn't even entertain it. They'd be more concerned about where you're going to be ending up without any experience. These days, though, there are a group of lenders that we would approach for first-time developers.
Yeah.
But it's realistic expectations. So if you're looking at small to medium-sized projects,
and I think it's good to put some parameters on this as well. So when we're talking about small, medium size development, we're talking, as a first-time developer, if you're doing a commercial conversion, for example, you want to be looking maximum 6 to 10 units, don't you, realistically?
Yeah, I mean, and also depends on the area as well.
Well, that's it, because then that affects the debt quantum, because if you're doing 6 units in central London, it's going to be a hell of a lot more.
Lenders get a lot more nervous the more you're borrowing. So I think the most important thing is and we've seen this when we work with property investors that are sort of naturally start gravitating towards development, is that, you know, they built up a portfolio, they start doing a bit of refurb. Before you know it, they're converting a property into an HMO.
Yeah.
They then move into converting one of their properties into flats, and they're sort of a natural evolution moving into development. But it's the sort of the discussions I have with clients about that is that a development never goes according to plan.
No.
Never. There's always something that pops up that you least expect it.
The contractor costs will be wrong. The GDV won't be as high as you expected.
Something will happen,
yeah,
which means that it's a problem that you'll need to fix as the client, as the developer. Now, if you're going for a smaller project when you're first starting out, that a smaller project means it's when the problem hits, it's a smaller problem to deal with, because usually it's about chucking money at something to make it go away.
Yeah.
If you start going for, you're stretching the boundaries of what you can actually do here, and a problem pops up with a larger project. A larger project means that if any problems pop up, they tend to be larger in scale, and they cost a lot more money.
And financially, they tend to be more expensive. If a contractor on a £10 million development goes bust, it's far more painful than a contractor going bust on a £100,000 development.
Yeah, so it's whilst it's exciting and that you can see the pound signs lighting up on potentially how much money you can make on a deal, it's got to be viewed as a journey. For your first-time developer, start small, work your way up. It's because it is a learning process for you.
Yeah,
and as much as, you know, some people get impatient. I'm impatient at the best of times, but when you're doing something like that and you're committing a lot of funds to it, you want to make sure that. If something does pop up, it's something you can actually deal with. So go for the smaller projects, and you'll learn a lot from it, because the types of problems that pop up for a smaller project compared to a larger project, they tend to be very similar. They just cost the cost differences can be quite massive.
Yeah.
So that's why we encourage people, for first-time developers, don't go for the bigger developments or bigger conversions. Start small, gain some knowledge, and then you start moving up. And the thing is, once you've done one or two projects, then you then start gaining more experience, and it opens up more lenders.
Yeah,
for us to approach. But it's certainly in the early days when you're taking on your first development, the lenders that we can approach that will entertain first-time developers or those who've got very limited experience, they won't focus on you as the developer. They will focus on the contractor mostly.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be relying on that contractor to build this thing out.
Yeah, the developer isn't there necessarily doing the work on site. It's all down to the contractor, isn't it, to actually deliver the day-to-days of that scheme.
Yeah, and depending on the scheme, the lender may actively encourage the client to get a project manager on board as well, just to make sure it gets done properly. So I think for those first-time developers, you've got to look at it as a learning curve and a bit of a journey.
And what are lenders looking for out of that contractor? Realistically, is their checklist of? Because it's very easy for me to go out on the street now and probably find a contractor who's, in quotations, a contractor. But realistically, what's the lender looking at out of that?
Yeah, so we've had a few recently where there was some relatively a couple of units, new builds.
Yeah.
Decent area. And the contractor that the client picked has done a few refurbs, done a few conversions and maybe an extension or two, but never done a ground up
right
as such. So when you're picking a contractor, yes, it's all about cost and everything else. You've got to look at that, but you've also got to look at their experience, because the lender will look at them very, very closely.
Yeah.
As to far as, have they done something similar to this before? They'll also look at how long they've been trading, because they've only been up for a couple of years. They're
not particularly interested, are they? No.
They kind of get a little bit worried. But the key thing for a first-time developer, or those with limited experience when you're picking a contractor, is make sure that contractor has got relevant experience in line with what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And you're not just focusing on release the cheapest. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get the job done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And for everyone watching and listening, thank you very much. Catch you on the next one.